Hello, welcome to our eNATOA on small cell and DOS deployment. My name is Brian Roberts, a policy analyst with the City and County of San Francisco and a member of the NATOA board. I'd like to welcome you all. I'm joined today by three distinguished speakers: Brian Mefford of Connected Nation Exchange, Brian Darr of Mosaic, and Natasha Horton of the Cohen Law Group. Due to the proliferation of Brian's, we're going to be going on the formal side today and refer to last names. Mr. Mefford will open with context on the interplay of local government and industry. Mr. Darr will speak to the emerging technology from the consumer standpoint, including local government as a consumer. And finally, Ms. Horton will describe some successes and what makes an arrangement between the industry and local government successful. We'll let each speaker provide their presentations, and the panel will take questions at the close of our session. You can submit them on the screen in front of you. So just to give a little general context, the focus of today's eNATOA is on the industry, technology, and the interplay with local government. While it is critical to be aware of the legislative and regulatory actions potentially impacting these arrangements at the state and federal level, for this webinar we're going to be focusing not exclusively but primarily on the technology, the industry, and the role of local government. So I'll introduce all three of our speakers, and then they'll just launch into their presentations in order. The first will be Brian Mefford, as I mentioned, of Connected Nation Exchange. He is the founder and CEO of CNX, as it's known. In 2012, he led the spinoff from Connected Nation, a leading nonprofit broadband consulting firm that Brian had founded and led as CEO for more than a decade. Today, CNX balances the needs of public entities and broadband service providers seeking to leverage public assets for expanding fiber, small cells, 5G wireless, and related smart city infrastructure. Our next speaker will be Brian Darr. He is the founder and president and CEO of Mosaic. He has actively participated in the evolution of the wireless industry since joining Cellular One in 1985. In 1988, he launched American Roamer, which in 2012 was rebranded as Mosaic. Brian currently leads the company's growth as a strategic partner to mobile operators, IoT providers, and public sector and enterprise clients to deliver superior wireless network services. And finally, Natasha Horton, with the Cohen Law Group, joined as an attorney after serving as a law clerk to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. Prior to that, she worked as law clerk for the Chapter 13 bankruptcy trustee for the Western District of Pennsylvania. Ms. Horton concentrates her efforts on wireless facilities regulation, cable franchise negotiations, and franchise fee audits. She services municipal clients of various sizes throughout the United States. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Mefford from Connected Nation Exchange.
Brian, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be with everyone today, and appreciate the opportunity to share some perspective on this very important issue. And want to first check with Brian or Tanya, either one, on both AV, that we're fired up and ready to go here.
Yes, I can both see your presentation and hear you.
Fantastic. All right. So, not to belabor the background, but our company, CNX, Connected Nation Exchange, is focused on these issues around striking the balance, as Tanya and Brian have framed this session today, And so we work to enable public agencies to modernize policies and practices that encompass these areas, the technical, the legal, regulatory, and financial aspects of using public assets for DAS and small cell build out. So we have a software platform where cities and states meet up with broadband providers to do just that, to manage their assets, to share data and streamline processes in order to conduct these transactions that are necessary to enable us to lease and leverage public assets for expanding connectivity. I want to sort of seize on the title of the session today and talk a lot about balance, and note to begin with that the pronunciation is there for you, balance, and not, as it seems to go oftentimes, not battle. So balance over battle. That's, I think, what we're about today in this session, is to find out how we strike that medium. And so I want to talk about the situation, the noun that is or isn't balance in today's market. So a condition in which different elements are equal or in the correct proportions. So we're going to look just briefly at those proportions and talk about how we may correct some things that are out of balance. And then the actions that are being taken or recommended in order to keep or put something in a steady position so that it does not fall or fail. And I want to kind of proposition or ask what is at stake exactly? What are we talking about? And there obviously are many perspectives on that. Whether 5G is hyperbole or hype or historic. And a recent speech to CTIE by Chairman Tom Wheeler, former chairman of the FCC, was pretty striking. And then he said, the nature of technology, and forgive me for reading to you, but the nature of technology makes the review and approval by community siting authorities and the associated costs and fees all the more critical. So with just over 200,000 cell towers in the U.S., there may be millions of small cell sites in the 5G future. So if siting for a small cell takes as long and costs as much as siting for a cell tower, few communities will ever have the benefits of 5G. And so that's why he says 5G is not a technology, it's a revolution. And he goes on to quote went on to quote John Gardner, who said, "History doesn't look like history when you're living it." He said, "The industry is not just living history, but writing it." And I believe you're not just about to turn the page, but rather open a whole new chapter in this ongoing story of how communications networks have transformed the world for the benefit of all of us. So I take that as the lead today to discuss the importance of getting this right. And so to first briefly touch on the objectives of the parties, and we see these most often in contrast, unfortunately. So on one side, we have wireless service providers, and you see their objectives there as I've laid those out, beginning with speed to market with world-class networks. That's the objective of the service providers. The first there in relation, cities and states, also want to provide world-class connectivity to their citizens and their businesses and their own agencies. So that top line provides our starting point of agreement. But all too often, and unfortunately, that's sort of where the agreement starts and stops. So on the wireless provider side, the other objectives, efficient access to more network sites. And you see that on counterbalanced by cities desiring to control and manage their public rights of way. There's a fear that viewscapes and utility poles and light poles will be inundated with new fiber and new sites, new cell sites. So that's the balance there. So again, back on the provider side, migration to small cells and setting the stage for the future of 5G. That's really what is happening with small cells right now. In addition to densifying the network, they're attempting to set the stage for 5G. Well, cities need to manage their public assets. Efficient interaction with government is what service providers are seeking, and cities, states, other public agencies are in need of adequate resources to be able to to facilitate those transactions. And finally, infrastructure business model that works. An infrastructure business model that works for carriers, and cities are looking for appropriate fees to be able to take care of their assets, take care of their right-of-ways, and provide the type of responsiveness that is being requested and demanded. So balance the current situation. Again, the noun where elements are equal or in the correct proportion. Just a bit of context. In 2015, there were more than 300 active applications in San Francisco. Another 800 expected by the end of 2016. San Francisco, as I've learned just recently from our host today, has approved 700 plus of those applications. So we hear from cities sometimes that say, well, we're not sure that this is really coming our way, but clearly with some peer cities, you can see that it is. Montgomery County has approximately 200 pending applications and has had more applications filed in the past 4 months than the past 18 years. Clark County, Nevada reports a 3,000% increase in 2016 siting applications compared to the previous 10 years combined. So balance, is there balance? Federal policies have placed the onus on cities to deal efficiently with those siting applications, instituted shot clocks for certain types of applications, different types of applications. There's a legislative model that's gaining traction in states to govern city behavior statewide. And I'd point your attention to the recently passed Ohio Senate Bill 330, which effectively removed local control of small cell and DAS siting processes. And some carriers or third parties, we see reported are flooding the system with new applications. But also, most public agencies have not yet adapted processes or changed ordinances to deal with small cell and DAS siting. And even some cities continue to respond with a moratorium approach or just slow walking the process. So we're at sort of a situation where we're at loggerheads between carriers and cities, and something has to give, and we really have to figure out how we come together and strike this balance that's needed in order to support the expansion of the next generation of networks. And so what are those activities that are needed? Well, first of all, the challenge and the active verbs that we need to adopt are optimizing our processes and city managed assets to support wireless investment. We need to process applications efficiently, and I would even add there, as I have, in compliance. I mean, federal law at this point stipulates and lays out how the process is intended to work and what the expectation is for reviewing and approving these applications. Third, to mind your viewscape and your public properties the way you understand is necessary and desired. And fourth, establish fair and reasonable fee structures. And finally, ensure that you're set up to deal with a growing number of these applications, these sites, long-term and effectively. And in so doing, our perspective is that this creates an opportunity for cities and states to truly become a leader in the 5G future. As I mentioned, the number of applications that San Francisco has approved. I mean, there's an example of city leadership where these sites are being approved and they are being built. There are too few examples of models available to us to follow, but there are some, and so I want to share a bit of that perspective now. Our recommendation for cities grappling with this onslaught of new applications and new sites, new permitting requests, is to deploy a siting one-stop shop for use by both the city and the service providers, a single location for both to come together and share that data and to navigate those transactions. We encourage this one-stop shop that can screen applications prior to submission for departmental routing. And a lot of times applications are coming through as ordinances are changing, applications are incorrect, it bogs down the system with unnecessary review of erroneous applications, and it's frustrating to the applicants, and a lot of that can be avoided. Next, allowing providers the ability to submit multiple applications at one time, basically batching those submittals. Allowing city planners to track all the submitted applications simultaneously, and ensuring that the design standards are known and met. And finally, maintaining all that data in a single location for all departments. And let me just say, our recommendation is for cities to move this way. I will now talk for 3 minutes, basically, about how we deploy this, with the point being that our recommendation here today is that cities determine and figure out how to make this one-stop shop work, whether that's internally or through a third party. But now I want to just demonstrate and be able to talk about the thing that I know best, which is our own platform. So aggregated data is key in this process. I just want to show you how this tends to work. And so here you have a city with all of the relevant departmental data having been loaded in this application, and a wireless provider able to come in and drop search rings to determine what assets are exactly available. And so as we drill in, then this particular service provider and this particular search ring is able to surface the utility poles that you see here now inside this ring, lit up, and available city fiber that can also be used, as well as raw land that could be a contender for a site location. You know, and here we have the metadata about each of those individual sites that can be selected and reviewed in more detail. And so as an individual site is selected, then simultaneously we can see imagery of that particular asset. So both the carrier, the provider, and city departments, as we're reviewing these applications, can see the picture, see the same picture, see the same metadata, understand the scenario on the same level. Carriers are able to drop a pin or create search rings and pull that information up, as I've mentioned. They can add that basically to a cart and submit that to begin the application process. And here we encourage this application screening process. So this is the view that a provider can see. And again, this is just using the city's own data, the city's own ordinances, along with federal guidance, 6409A, which I'm sure others will talk in more detail about, to basically pre-screen these applications. And so just as an example here, the first question is this an extension? Is this, you know, are you adding height to utility pole? And the height, the specific height, will trigger either a 6409 type shot clock in process, or a 332, or perhaps there's a local ordinance that kicks it into a different type of screening process. And why that works is we've talked, I'm going to kind of skip through some of this to save time for other presenters, but again, the key point is this eliminates some erroneous submittals that create departmental backlogs. So if it's a 10-foot extension, but it's submitted through the process that really should be for 3-foot extensions, these things matter. If there are more cabinets that trigger a different type of review process, these things matter and can be filtered on the front end. Here I just want to make the point that you want to capture all of the information in one place. Again, for the service providers and the department heads who will be reviewing these, or the departmental staff who will be reviewing these, and we capture the information, technical information, as well as the shot clock and the process review information over time. And so it provides sort of easy and accurate applications that filter those expectations. This is the view then that the carrier would have. Then we flip over to the view that the city has. Again, importance being, this is all in one place. Now, of course, a service provider does not have the view of a city reviewer, but they're coming to the same place. They're able to see, and so here, simplified city review and approval process it cycles through predetermined approval workflow. Planners can sort of comment in the same place. And again, this is not a sales pitch, but it's to say that you need this as a city so that the process of review across departments, this information can be weighed in a simultaneous fashion or iteratively, as is noted here. But the review can be happening simultaneously, but with review triggers according to the existing city processes. And again, a key point being that all the data, the applications, the site information, the pre-construction photo simulations, the as-built drawings, the inspections all remain in a single location. And that history is there over time. The city reviewers are able to review that detailed information. They can post questions to one another about status, about particular details, and all departments are able to track the shot clock over time. And again, however you create this, whether it's internally or otherwise, we just see this as a very important aspect to bring everyone on the same page and to provide that platform for collaboration that strikes the balance that we're looking for. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Brian.
Thank you, Brian. And our next speaker, Brian Dar, will take us through his presentation. I think you have it in front of your screen now. Thank you. And just a reminder to please submit questions for the panel. We'll be reviewing them at the end of the presentations. Thanks.
This is Brian Dar, just checking to make sure everyone can hear me and see the presentation.
Yes, I can.
Very
Thank
good.
You.
Thank you. I wanted to give a quick introduction on who we are and what we do here at Mosaic. We've been around for 28 years. We started out doing the roaming guides, little books tell you how to use your phones when you travel many, many years ago. Many of our clients, in the early days, our clients primarily were the wireless operators. That is still a significant amount of who we work with today. We track who the operators are globally, what spectrum they're using, and what levels of technology they've rolled out where. But there are a lot of other people, a lot of other interested parties, technology providers, real estate, agriculture, regulatory, that utilize our services as well. And what we do with this information is we help people visualize and understand what this coverage is it where we need it to be, is a particular technology available, and so forth, and we help them visualize that. So enough of the background on us. I want to talk a little bit about smart cities, certainly a moniker that gets a lot of traction nowadays, and how to make cities smarter, regardless of where a given municipality may be on this timeline. It's important to understand that there are a lot of factors that are critical to the growth and health of a city and what the citizens want. And of course, the cities themselves tend to be consumers of wireless networks. And one of the points that we want to make here today, if not the main point, is that cities need to have a deeper insight as to what the network experience is on the various networks within their system. Many cities will have a master agreement with one operator, perhaps, that handles virtually all of their mobile communications within the cellular category. And that is certainly important to have, but there are other networks operating in your cities, and you have citizens depending upon those, and so it's important to understand what's happening across all of these different networks. At the core of this, of course, in importance is public safety. There's 240 million 911 calls made annually. The vast majority of them now are made from wireless devices, not from home telephones, not from office phones. There is a very large segment of the population that has got hearing impairments and speech impairments that make it difficult or more difficult for them to communicate. So being able to communicate via mobile devices through text and other forms is critical to them. And text to 911 is being rolled out across the country, so that the data aspect can be just as critical for these people as the voice aspect has been for all of these years. FirstNet gets a tremendous amount of attention right now. They're pretty deep in their process of determining how they're going to build out this nationwide network. And just a couple of quick things about FirstNet is that, of course, they're not going to build out their own network. They're going to supplement a network or a series of networks that already exist. The cost of building a full-blown nationwide network, they determined in the early days, was just simply going to cost too much. And so they're looking to utilize existing networks and then to spend their money to fill in the holes, expand coverage into areas where it hasn't been economically feasible for the operators themselves, in order to try and maximize the footprint of a nationwide network across the entire country, not just where people live, but where they travel, where they hike, and things of those sort. But there are holes, of course, within municipalities as well, as we all know. And they're going to be concerned about these areas too. Having a wireless network is going to be necessary for all of these things that people are talking about on the smart city side, everything from smart meters to smart garbage cans to understanding better what the energy consumption is, or controlling energy consumption from a central location. These devices in the field that are going to connect to water meters, that are going to connect to light poles, it only works where there is a network. If there is a hole in the network, or if the network throughput is too poor, then the money that's spent on these devices to put them out in the field may not provide the performance or the level of information that you really are looking for. And then, of course, the networks are critical to the quality of life. There was a seminar I went to a couple of years ago where a real estate agent mentioned that the third most important thing that people ask about a home that they're considering buying, or an apartment that they're considering renting, is wireless connectivity. Its location, its price, and its connectivity. People demand broadband connectivity in order to live the kind of life and have the type of communication with their friends, relatives, connections to entertainment that gives them a high quality of life. But of course, there are significant other movements right now in the mobile health area. The idea that you'll be able to wear a device if you're a diabetic and be monitored all the time. Push notifications are already going on for weather emergencies and Amber Alerts. You're not going to get those notifications if the network isn't of high enough quality in a particular area where a citizen may be at a particular time. And of course, the citizens are looking for not only better broadband, but it gives them access to job postings. It gives them access to online education. And without these networks, then they can find themselves without the connectivity they need to improve their lives. So one of the things that we do here at Mosaic, and there are other people in this field as well, is we have an application called Sensorly. And what you're looking at here is just a portal into this data that we're collecting. We collect billions of records, information from literally all around the globe every year that come from a community of people who have downloaded our application. And from that information, we then aggregate that data. The downloads, by the way, are kept very anonymous. We don't know who they are necessarily. There's some secret sauce I can explain later, or if anyone wants to follow up with me. But we're collecting this information, and then we've got the ability to visualize it and understand where the networks are strong and where they're weak. And in this particular example, we've picked T-Mobile here, but they'll all have strong and weak areas in them. And understanding what that looks like at the neighborhood level is critical. So ultimately, as everyone's trying to improve the broadband infrastructure, the earlier Brian was talking about all the aspects that municipalities are having to deal with in order to determine how to best deal with these requests, these massive requests that are coming in at this point, and having access to better information, knowing where the networks are working well, where they are not, where there are capacity issues, can also help put you more in the driver's seat. The operators historically have come and said, we've got a problem here, we need a tower or a small cell, we need to be able to fix this, and we need to do it as quickly as possible. And at the same time, cities may have their own areas of priorities. The operators may well be telling the truth about where they need help, but the cities may also say, well, here's an area where we have very poor connectivity, we have people in an economically stressed area that are having very poor connectivity problems, and we'd like your help in these areas. But understanding where the problems exist can help streamline some of these zoning issues. It can help determine if you do know where the fiber is, if you do know where the power is, then you've got the ability to overlay this with other information sets that help you make the determination as to how serious the problem may be in a given area. Municipal Wi-Fi has got some people that are big proponents. Others are not quite as hot on it. But if you do have a municipal Wi-Fi system or are thinking about getting one, then you also need to know how that Wi-Fi system is performing, and understanding that there are issues currently between people swapping back and forth from the Wi-Fi to the cellular network, back to the Wi-Fi, and so forth. What kind of experience are those devices and those customers having as that transference is taking place back and forth between the different types of networks? So the way that operators historically have collected this information is by drive testing. Very expensive, vehicle on the road, network engineer in the vehicle, and some extraordinarily expensive equipment in the back in order to go out and try and determine where the issues are with the network. It's great for diagnosing specific network problems, but it does just give you a snapshot. Some people that drive test, they may drive test a market twice a year. So as that vehicle goes through an intersection, it tells you what that intersection looks like in that given spot at a given time on a given day. It does not tell you what that intersection looks like 2 hours later, 2 days later, 2 weeks later. So to understand what's really happening, you need to see trending, you need to see everyday network performance and being able to average that, because even things like weather, for instance, if there are leaves on the trees, then your signal can be interfered with in a different way than at a different time of year when the leaves aren't on the trees, just as a very simple for instance. So as you're looking at the neighborhood level, and these are real readings, by the way, that we've taken from user devices that have been running around. This is a particular part of New York I think we used as an example. You'll see there are areas where this network is very, very strong and areas where it's not so much. And so if you have a large area that needs significant improvement, well, you may want a macro cell for that. You may actually need a new tower. But there are other areas where it's quite small, and you're going to need a lot of these. And so you need the networks need to be supplemented with small cells in situations like this, where they don't necessarily need a new full-size macro tower. Having this level of information can help forward that discussion with the operators that you're working with. And then, of course, there's indoor. And the indoor small cell helps out on the outside. It'll help on the street corner. But depending upon the construction, the type of materials that have been used for the building, how thick the building is, and a whole bunch of other factors, then DAS networks are going to be very helpful indoors. And there are, of course, outdoor DAS networks that work well for specific purposes as well. And the type of information that can be gathered off of the handsets is quite extensive, and you see here several dozen different pieces of information that we're capturing, which would be the quality of the signal, the throughput on the device. It includes cell IDs and a whole host of different things that are extraordinarily helpful in determining what the quality is of the network that particular device is picking up. And then that can be aggregated into benchmarks that can help give visibility into how a network is performing overall. We've all had times when our devices work really well in a particular spot, and the next day at a different time, same spot, they don't work as well. So seeing an aggregated amount of information over a period of time can help determine whether or not it was just a hiccup at a given moment, or is this an ongoing problem with congestion or with just poor signal quality. So as the demand for wireless connectivity continues to evolve, here's just a few things we wanted to leave you with as part of the at the end of our presentation here. About 80% of data usage takes place indoors currently, as people are using their mobile devices, so much for entertainment purposes as well as for communication. 5G technology, we're hearing a lot about people testing this. True 5G, full-blown 5G technology is still several years away, but there are interim improvements or evolving improvements that will take place over the next couple of years. And that this swapping back and forth between cellular and Wi-Fi will improve, but right now it's certainly there's certainly a lot of issues with it, and it's not seamless by any means, being able to transfer back and forth from one type of network to another. The number of devices that will be in the field, though, that are not necessarily associated with a person, the Internet of Things or industrial Internet of Things, people have referred, just machine to machine was the old term for it. There could be billions of these things in the not too distant future. Those devices on light poles and garbage cans that we talked about, as well as consumer devices out there in the field and businesses looking at remote monitoring of assets. All of this is going to be critical, and people do make decisions about where they live, what part of town they live in, and if based upon whether or not they're happy with a host of different things. It's not just are there good restaurants in the area, but connectivity is so important to them. That's playing a bigger and bigger part. Autonomous vehicles, there's so much talk about how this is going to change cities, but one of the things that we're looking at is that autonomous vehicles also, if people no longer have to drive the car but are just going to ride in the car, how might that change their behavior? And it could see data usage be driven significantly upward. So I will leave you with that. Brian, I'll turn it back over to you.
Great, thank you, Brian. And our next speaker is Natasha Horton. And then we're getting some good questions, and hopefully we'll have some time toward the end to go through those. So, Natasha? I can see your presentation.
Oh, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Terrific.
All right, fantastic. Okay, thanks, Brian. You know, as Brian said earlier, my name is Natasha Horton. I'm an attorney at the Cohen Law Group. We are a boutique firm that specializes in cable, wireless, and broadband matters, representing only local governments. You know, just over the past 3 or 4 years, we've represented over 250 municipalities on various wireless matters. So this is part of what we do every single day of the week, sometimes on the weekends too. And our firm has been around for about 20 years. We have offices in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and Seattle, Washington. Oh, uh-oh. Okay, there we go. That's me. So I just want to give a really quick overview of my presentation. I am going to talk about the impact of this new infrastructure on municipalities, outline some really basic municipal legal rights under federal law. present a case study of what can happen if your municipality isn't prepared for this technology, discuss how to prepare and respond to this new technology, and then just really quickly touch on some industry actions on the state and federal levels. And also I want you to keep in mind that we're a law firm that works with municipalities from, population 100 to 5 million. So I really tried to make this presentation applicable to large and small cities, different types of municipalities. So some of what I say is a little bit general, and of course if you have any questions, feel free to get in touch with me after the presentation. Also, please keep in mind that our firm solely represents local government, so everything that I'm going to say is coming from a municipal perspective. Okay, so as the other speakers have said, these facilities, small cell facilities and DAS facilities, they're necessary for good cellular coverage and a good connection to wireless broadband. And they're also being installed, a really large amount of them, by carriers like Mobility, Crown Castle. Mobility's name has been in the news, so I'm sure everybody's familiar with them. Tons of them are being installed right now for 5G. I'm still not really sure what 5G is. I've been to several municipal conferences over the past year, and what the technology exactly is still eludes me a bit, but we're told that it's going to make for faster, better coverage, and it's going to change the way that we live and work, although we're not 100% sure. But in any case, in our firm's experience, our municipal clients have been very welcoming of new technologies. They want to keep their citizens happy. They want them to have solid wireless broadband, but at the same time, they're really concerned about preserving the integrity of their communities. Historic areas, for example, are areas where all utilities are underground, and the provider wants to come in and install a new pole in the public rights-of-way where all utilities are beneath the ground. And also, our clients want to protect their rights-of-way. It's probably the most valuable property right that any municipality has, or one of the most valuable property rights, is those public rights-of-way. So it's really critical that everybody understand on the webinar, and I'm sure you do, that these wireless facilities, for the most part, add a new burden to public rights-of-way that are already pretty crowded, or that have their utilities located underground and are very sensitive, because people move into an area with underground utilities wanting their utilities to stay underground. And also, these facilities, in the case of Mobility at least, that are being placed in the right-of-way can reach up to 120 feet, and this is what's called a mini cell tower. So, there has to be some regulation in place because these facilities are installed in the rights-of-way, because they're obviously different from traditional cell towers. They require different regulations. Just on a practical level, you really can't have a fencing requirement, setback requirement, shrubbing requirement, anything like that for a facility that's going to be in the right-of-way. At the same time, you don't want large cabinets. You don't want any types of objects protruding onto sidewalks or into the cartway. So, it's important that when you're writing regulations to deal with these facilities, you keep that in mind. Also, to add another layer of complexity to all of this, is that most DAS contractors, I'm just going to throw in Mobility again, have gone to state public utility commissions and gotten certificates of public convenience and necessity from those PUCs. And that's a really, really big game changer, because when they come to your municipality, they're coming under the guise, Mobility, for example, American Tower Company, for example, they're coming under the guise as a public utility. So you really need to be mindful of that status when you're drafting regulations, implementing regulations that address these facilities in the public rights-of-way. So actually, as a side note, I'm going to throw in here that state PUCs across the nation have begun questioning whether wireless contractors should actually even have that utility status. In Pennsylvania last year, for example, the commission there opened up public comment as to whether wireless contractors should be issued certificates of public convenience and necessity. Our firm filed comments on behalf of all public municipal associations. There are 4 of them, and over 100 municipalities sent in letters to the Commission. So, whether or not these providers should have that status is being questioned, so keep that in mind as well. But our general recommendation, and the model that we've really seen work time after time in our practice, is that if a municipality is proactive and develops a legally sustainable regulatory structure that A, protects the municipality, and B, provides residents with wireless broadband service, if you have something like that in place, it really makes for a successful arrangement between local government and the industry. So let's talk a little bit about, just generally, about municipal legal rights. The Telecom Act of '96 says that a local government cannot prohibit or have the effect of prohibiting wireless facilities. Okay, you can't keep them out, but it preserves local zoning authority over the placement and construction and modification of those wireless facilities. So even though these wireless contractors have certificates of public convenience and necessity, in most states, okay, not all, most states, you can still exercise some type of control over the placement of those facilities, even though you're dealing with a public utility. So you have to use zoning, but you can do it. Now, of course, this is Congress, so with any broad grant of authority, there are limitations on that authority. Limitations in these circumstances come in the form of timeframes, permitted installations, co-locations, times of approval, etc. Just a couple of those: shot clock ruling, the Spectrum Act, the FCC's 2014 report and order. It's about 150 pages. Don't read it when you're tired. And then there's also some really very district-specific federal case law that's out there as well. So when you're going to update your zoning code to address facilities in the public rights of way, address these new generation facilities, really keep all of that in mind and do a good case law search in your district, and also probably state law as well, just to be safe, to see if there are any additional regulations out there. For example, in Pennsylvania, there's the PA Wireless Broadband Co-Location Act. It's an additional layer of regulation that you really have to deal with when you're drafting. There are not a ton of DAS cases because the technology, I mean, it's not new at this point, but it's relatively new. But key federal cases generally uphold zoning authority over DAS contractors' right-of-way authority, except in a few states like Virginia. So now we know these facilities are necessary. Mr. Mefford and Mr. Dard did a really great job in explaining what these facilities are doing. Legally, I'm telling you, you can't keep them out if the provider proves that they need to locate that facility in your municipality to fix a service issue. And you know now that the only way you can really regulate them is through zoning. So what happens if your municipality doesn't prepare for these facilities at all? I'm going to give you a hint. I could have alternatively titled this slide, How to Avoid a Hot Mess, because that's what Northampton Township found itself in. This is what my boss likes to call the ground zero for DAS installations in Pennsylvania. This is Janet Swenson. She's a really lovely woman. She's a resident of Northampton Township, and she woke up one day to look out the kitchen window and see a guy on her front lawn spray painting a circle. So she went out to him and she said, "What are you doing? You're on my front lawn." And he replied, "Oh, well, I'm a contractor with ATC, American Tower Company, and we're going to put a 25-foot fiberglass pole here right in front of your house where all utilities are located underground." And needless to say, she was not happy. So what had actually happened here was that ATC had gotten a CNC from the Pennsylvania PUC, and they were beginning to install a DAS network consisting of 60 antennas in the public rights of way. Now, an antenna placement can be pretty benign if it's on a utility pole, if it's on a traffic light. You can also negotiate a nice lease payment for it on the municipal side if it's going on a traffic light or a utility pole that you own, so keep that in mind. But the thing that ATC wanted to do is they wanted to go into these residential subdivisions, expensive ones, where all utilities were located underground and put up a dozen new towers that were 25 to 40 feet in height. The township initially treated this as a right-of-way matter, said ATC, here's our right-of-way ordinance, we want to put a 5% fee of gross revenues on you. ATC laughed, promptly went to the Pennsylvania State Court and got an injunction and said, I don't think so, Northampton Township. So ATC started installing their nodes, they started constructing new poles, and what Janet Swenson witnessed was an ATC workman surveying and marking proposed locations in neighborhoods where, again, all utilities are located underground. So the township residents kind of got together at this point, were really upset, and became incensed. And when I say incensed, they almost rioted against their board, which they should have. They were angry about it. And this is the point where our firm got involved because the township had already lost in federal court, right? So Dan Cohen, who is the principal of our firm, really kind of put his head down and thought about this from a telecom perspective. And this little light bulb went off. And he said, you know what? We're going to use the Federal Telecom Act to deal with this issue. The Township Board pulled ATC's permits based on non-compliance with township zoning requirements, pointed ATC to the zoning code, and said that ATC had to meet the requirement that no new telecom facilities be located in residentially zoned areas. Big disclaimer, this position does not work for most suburban municipalities. I do not recommend it. You want better broadband, you want better connectivity. So, you have to let them in some residential areas for the most part. At least that's what I tell my clients, but just a little disclaimer there for you. In any case, work on the DAS system ceased. The township went to federal court and filed a case stemming from a violation of the Telecom Act of '96, which preserves the township zoning authority. And it pretty much, it worked. ATC kind of grabbed all its engineers, they got together, they were able to reconfigure that system to eliminate the 12 proposed new towers that were going to be placed in areas where all utilities were underground. So, this was a win. ATC still was able to build its system out. Residents didn't have poles in areas where utilities were underground. Residents got the benefit eventually of better connectivity to wireless broadband service, but to get to this point, the township had to go to court, endure litigation, and then pay some pretty hefty attorney's fees. And really, all of that could have been avoided with a solid zoning ordinance in place that addresses these facilities in a fair manner, keeping in mind that the companies installing them have public utility status. Your municipality won't have to go to court. It'll be easily able to deal with wireless contractors when they come to your door and when they knock and they say, okay, we want to put these facilities in your public rights of way. You can say, great. Here's the applicable section of our zoning code. Here's exactly what you need to do. So, start effectively planning now. All municipalities are different in their size, zoning districts, topography, etc. You want to preserve your historical areas if you have them. You want to make sure that sensitive areas where utilities are all underground, and they have been since the mid-'70s, those areas are preserved, especially when people look for that when they purchase a home. We don't recommend using a generic wireless facilities ordinance. It's landed a couple of our clients in some hot water, and then we've gotten involved, and we've been able to put it in a better place. So we recommend drafting something based on what you have now and kind of going from there. So call your solicitor or pull your zoning code off its dusty shelf and open it up, or go to ETH Code 360, depending on how technology savvy your municipality is, and look at what you have in place. Look at your existing cell tower and antenna regulations, because we're going to recommend that you either repeal and replace them or do some type of substantive amendment. And what you want to look for is that you want to make sure your municipality's ordinance complies with current laws and regulations, addresses the newest technologies, both inside and outside the public rights of way, provides appropriate authority, appropriate legal protections for your municipality, preserves the character of your community. This is a big one, because whether or not people decide to move to your community, reside in your community, stay in your community, a lot of it depends on that character. And then also, where it's permitted by state law, enables the collection of fees for wireless facilities. And you really have to remember throughout all of this that these contractors have public utility status. I can't stress that enough. They have it. There's nothing you can really do about it. So you can't be overly restrictive with your zoning regulations. You don't want to give them a discrimination claim. So you want to make sure that your amended ordinance doesn't have the effect of prohibiting any type of provision of service. The bottom line is that you want to take your old ordinance and make it into a comprehensive wireless facilities ordinance that protects your residents, addresses new technologies, incorporates regulatory changes, and really strikes that balance between the need for wireless broadband and the integrity of your community. And then also, just in 1 minute, there's some really serious stuff going on at the state and federal levels right now. In various states, the wireless industry has introduced legislation that would essentially strip municipalities of the right to control the construction and location of wireless facilities in their public rights of way, meaning that a contractor such as Mobility would be able to come in and put in a 120-foot tower along any roads anywhere in your municipality, including residential areas, including areas where all utilities are already underground. Something similar has been enacted in Ohio. Mr. Mefford alluded to it earlier, and it's happening in other states right now. In Pennsylvania, our firm is working with all of the wireless associations on an issue like this. You don't want your state legislature to start chipping away at your zoning code, though, because who knows what could fall next. Your municipal powers are put in jeopardy when they start to be weakened by the state legislature chipping away at them. And then also recently, Mobility filed a petition for a declaratory ruling with the FCC to help expedite the deployment of next generation wireless infrastructure.
Right.
This is something else. Oh, I'm done now. And NATOA, I'm sorry, NATOA filed a response and a request for an extension that was granted. So any questions, please get in touch with myself or Dan Cohen.
Great, thank you, Natasha, and thanks to, I'm going to thank all of our presenters right now, and then we'll get to as many questions as we can. And those we don't get to, I'll see if I can round folks up with for a written response. We might not get to them all. So again, thank you, Mr. Mefford and Mr. Dar and Ms. Horton. The presentations will be sent to the attendees as well as a recording. And I just want to make an announcement, maybe a slight change of subject. For our next eNATOA will be February 9th, and it will be on social media for public education government access. So with that, I think I'll go to the questions that we had, and maybe I'll have one for each of the presenters, and then we'll see what we can do. And if they're willing, maybe I'll forward them to get a written response for those we don't get to. First, for Brian Mefford, what advice would you give to planning or community development staff in small cities who receive multiple applications at once that may not have the staff to handle more than one or two applications at a time?
Thanks, Brian. Yeah, very, very common situation. So let me just kind of run through kind of the top list of top 5 things to do. First, agree completely with Natasha. First thing you need to do is update your ordinance, your relevant telecom ordinance, or your zoning codes, or I shouldn't say and your zoning codes, and your relevant franchise agreement models. And overall, just acknowledge, you realize this. There's give and take opportunities here. I mean, that's the, going back to the balance part of the title. Carriers are willing to work with you on these things when, particularly when they see you taking action. Number 2, create design standards and provide those, provide multiple compliance scenarios. So then you're bringing some level of standardization to the process. It doesn't have to be heavy-handed, but you know, again, give and take. You want to have scenarios that, you know, once you see a box is checked, this kind of design standard submission. It provides some simplicity to the process of approval. Next, number 3, re-engineer your processes. This doesn't have to be an overwhelming exercise. You know, map your current processes. You know, measure times that it takes across departments to review applications, and then, you know, create a management plan for those. Next, establish a right-of-way forecasting program. This is something we've seen cities do to great effect. Have that, you know, providers participate in that, so you can both proactively manage your right-of-way and understand what kind of applications will be coming in. 2 more things. You know, again, give and take. Provide a fast-track process as, you know, the operators and carriers are able to comply with, you know, those design standards and your new processes and the new ordinance. Create an ability to process those applications faster when those requirements are met. And finally, communicate. Just begin to you know, work with the providers, with the operators, help them understand what your processes are, what your expectations are, and again, you'll see, I believe, some give and take, particularly when you're working more directly with the carriers themselves.
Okay. Thank you. I think we'll just have time for one more question to Mr. Dar, and that is, where does Mosaic get its performance data? Is it from the wireless carriers? If not, where does the data come from?
We get data from multiple sources. First of all, we have an application that can be downloaded either on the Android store or on the iTunes store called Sensorly. And we've got people literally anonymously collecting data for us in the background all the time, all across the world. It's been a very popular application, and the value that we provide back to the consumer is that we show them the maps not only for the network that they're operating on, but for the competing network, so that if they're interested in changing from one to another for price reasons, for quality reasons, for whatever, that it provides them with some visibility into the experiences that other people on the other networks have had. But we do have a long-standing relationship with the operators as well, and crowdsourcing only works where there's a crowd. So particularly in rural areas, you're not going to get very much information back, yet there are wireless networks very extensively out across rural America and across the world in rural areas that crowdsourcing can't properly represent. And so the maps that you see on television for Verizon or AT&T or whomever, these are their marketed coverage maps based upon predicted RF propagation. We do collect that information up, normalize it, and we have it available as part of our database in order to supplement and complement the other data sources that we have.
Okay. Well, thank you, and thank you both, and Natasha as well. We do have to wrap up right now. There were some additional questions, and we'll thank the audience for those. We will forward those to the presenters and redistribute them to the list of attendees as we get responses back. So again, it was a great presentation, probably more content than we had time for. That's always a good thing.